Hi, I'm Mike Hutjens, Extension Dairy Specialist at the University of Illinois. This module will discuss two aspects: building rations, my philosophy, how I put rations together, and second of all, how do you get paid as a consultant, nutritionist, or veterinarian. Let's go through the various steps in building the ration, and you'll see each of these. And this is how I go through it. The first step is to select the forage program. Now, this will be the backbone of the ration. If the farmer has poor quality forages, you and I have a huge problem because you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And once we've got the forage program set or challenge the farmer to make it better next year, we then look at what concentrates do I build into to complement the forages. And by concentrates, I'm talking primarily byproduct feeds to try to make the ration better, and also energy sources such as high moisture corn, barley, or some combinations of those cereal grains. Once we've got that step done, we then come in and say, okay, what is my protein status and how do I build the protein program? What supplements do I use? What about soluble, degradable, undegradable protein? Those considerations on the herd. Once we've solved that one, then I would go down to the next step and say, okay, do I need supplemental fat and oil? And we'll give you some target numbers when I bring those products into the feeding program. And am I going to be looking at oil seeds? Am I going to be looking at an inert fat? Do I need any fat or oil at all in the ration? And then I move on to minerals and vitamins because by and large, they take very little space. And then I come in and make sure that I have the mineral and vitamin levels I like to have. And finally, I ask, is it economical? What is my cost per pound of dry matter, cost per 100 pounds of milk, to be sure that I haven't built a ration what I really need on paper is going to put this producer in the poor house. So let's go through each one of these and give you some benchmark guidelines. On forages, target about 2% of the cow's body weight as forage dry matter. So if I have a 1,400 pound cow, I would like to see about 28 pounds of forage dry matter coming off my ration software program. If forage quality is excellent, this number will go up greater than 2%. It may make up 60-65% of the total ration dry matter. If the forage really is low quality, this number may drop down to as low as 1.5%. In Illinois, notice the word Illinois, Hutjens bias, I would like my farmer to target 2/3 of the total forage dry matter as corn silage and 1/3 as a legume source. This could be hay, this could be silage, this could be straw. It's going to be a different source. Why do I do that in Illinois? Because historically, this is the cheapest ration. My nutrient cost using corn silage is very, very competitive. Now, if soybean meal goes sky high, which it may some years, then you may want to revisit this point. But with the ethanol plants coming on, I think you're going to see that's going to put some pressure on keeping inexpensive protein supplements available. And of course, our neighbors to the south, Brazil and Argentina, really producing a lot of soybeans, also will probably keep some pressure on our soybean meal prices or soy prices here in the U.S. Next, I'm going to add 2 to 5 pounds of hay. Notice that I didn't say what kind of hay. I will add that if I need to get particle sizes adequate in the ration. I want 5 pounds of feed on the top of my Penn State box. 5 pounds of forage particles that over 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch in length. So this could be baled hay, this could be processed hay, this could be straw, this could be any long particle size. The magic length I want is 3/4 to 2 inches. It functions, it floats, but the cow can't sort it. And so I could come in with my 1 or 2 pounds of straw at this point. Typically on a lactating ration, 1 or 2 pounds of straw is about all I'd like to see in there. For dry cow rations, this may go up from as high as 3, and I've seen in some situations as high as 8 pounds of straw in the dry cow ration. For me, processing corn silage is a must, no questions asked. Set it up right. If the corn is wet, you'll go coarser, open up the unit. If it gets drier, you'll change it around. So I want everything processed, no ifs, ands, or buts about it on the farm long term. And then finally, look at your output sheets. I would like to see about 0.9% of the body weight as forage NDF. Our computers will calculate that for you. Or another way is look at 19 to 21% effective NDF, which means I have discounted every feed stuff, and you've heard about that in some of the earlier modules. Let's move on to our second point. What about concentrates? Pretty good thumb rule, about 3 pounds of milk for each pound of grain. Very useful for large breed cows. What a nice thumb rule. And remember, this pound of grain includes the energy feeds, it includes the byproduct feeds, it includes also the protein supplements. You might want to cheat fuzzy cottonseed out of that one. That one is kind of a gray one at this stage of the game. For your color breed cows, specifically Jerseys, you may want to drop that ratio down to about 2.5 or 2.25 because of the higher components coming in the milk level. I'm going to look at starch levels somewhere around 26 to 30%. If that starch is extremely finely processed, coming from fermented corn silage, coming from high moisture corn, I'm going to head that number closer to 26 or 25. If I've got a lot of haylage, I need fermentable carbohydrate in the rumen, I'll tweak that number closer to 30. A lot of people like that range 26 to 28. There is some work out of Michigan State that says you can go as high as 30 if the particle size of the grain and the forages are correct. I want the grain modestly fine if it's a dry grain, because otherwise it will not ferment as rapidly in the rumen or in the total digestive tract. I want 1100 micron for my dairy cows if it's ground corn. Can also go to heat treating, such as steam flaking of corn or heat processing as roasting. That will also increase the starch availability. Or if I go to high moisture, and usually at high moisture feeds, this needs to be over 25% moisture and approaching 30 to have the same rapid fermentation profile that you'll find in Betty Crocker corn or in heat-treated corn products. The barleys have some same type of numbers. Usually we're steam flaking barley or rolling barley. Canada has some nice guidelines on the weight of those in terms of bushel weights. For steam flaking, that bushel weight needs to be around 26 pounds per bushel weight for optimal performance for dairy cows. That's different for beef cattle. Basically, high levels of grain is out. Usually when I start seeing more than 15 pounds of corn, barley, dry matter in a ration, I get nervous. That means we got some either very poor quality forages, very little corn silage, or corn silage that's been drought stressed that doesn't contain very much grain. So high grain levels are out. 10 years ago, you'd see 20 pounds of grain dry matter in a ration, and we're just saying we don't see that, especially if it's heavy on the starchy corn side of it. I like 3 to 5 pounds of byproduct feeds. To me, it's in product because it improves digestible fiber. And here we're looking for such things as fuzzy cottonseed if you need the oil, soy hulls if you need to take some starch out of the diet, citrus pulp if we're looking for some digestible fiber and some sugar, beet pulp if it's priced right because if it's high pectin concentrations, corn gluten feeds, mids, they all would fall in this category. But in Illinois, if I got quality forages, automatically I'm coming with 3 to 5 pounds of one of these byproduct feeds, depending what I'm trying to complement in the rest of the ration. Let's move on to protein supplements. Again, these are Hutjens biases, but that's why we're kind of taking the class. The first pound to pound and a half of protein supplement will be from soybean meal. It gives me some short-chain peptides. It gives me some amino acids in the rumen. According to the Cornell workers and Charlie Sniffen, it just seems to be the right way to go on the first increment of protein supplement. And generally in Illinois, that'll be your most economical source. Now, perhaps down in the southern part of the United States, it could be cottonseed may come into play here. Again, legume-based source. You may come into a sunflower meal if you're up in Minnesota, in the Dakotas, whatever be available here. Then I come down when we come with distiller's grain. I like this recipe on a dry matter base, about 50% soybean meal, 50% distiller's grain. This could be dry or wet. You could go either way. Limit the distiller's grain to a maximum of 5 pounds of dry matter because of the unsaturated oil and the risk of trans acids and what it may do to the butterfat test on dairy cows. The third bolus is what we call our Amish blend, very popular in Illinois. 1/3 roasted soybeans, 1/3 corn distillers, 1/3 soybean meal. And that brings all three elements in. The soybean meal we mentioned earlier, the distillers brings in some bypass methionine, some extra fat, an extremely palatable type feed resource. The 1/3 roasted soybeans brings me some more oil to the party. It also brings me some lysine and also is a palatability plus, and in many cases can be fairly economical here in the Midwest. If we're going to go to blood meal, I stay on blood meal to less than a half a pound of blood meal, or, and I use the word or, a pound to pound and a half of pork, meat, and bone meal. And it must be pork. It is illegal to feed ruminant meat and bone meal. It could be poultry, but it must not be ruminant meat and bone meal. And notice I use the word or. I know some of you like to double up on this. I am concerned about palatability factors and intake factors if I come in with over a half a pound of blood meal and 1 to 1.5 pounds of meat and bone meal. Yes, people feed 2, 2.5. Hey, if you can get away with that, fine. Have at it, but yeah, I'm giving you my biases at this point. What about urea? We target probably something less than 1/4 pound of urea, and that is totally driven off soluble protein. We like our soluble protein somewhere around 30% of the total ration dry matter, or about half of the degradable protein. Never will I go above 0.4 pounds. So very common to see 1 to 2/10 pound of urea, especially on high corn silage and baled hay type rations, because my soluble proteins tend to be low. In one case, because of the low protein content of the corn silage and because of the dry characteristic of the hay, there just isn't much soluble protein there compared to, say, haylage or other wetter resources on the farm. As far as methionine sources, to me, the most economical play to go for a feed ingredient is corn distillers or corn gluten meal. And distillers normally is always cheaper for us in Illinois, but check them out. And on the lysine side, I'm going to go to soy products or blood meal as a source there. You can buy protected amino acids. They are certainly working very effectively if you make sure you know the level and the amount you need to add. And usually methionine is the targeted protected amino acid of source. And there's about 3 or 4 of them on the marketplace, typically 1 or 2 cents per gram to add to the ration. Moving on to fats and oil supplements. These would be how I would step through it. First, I determine, do I need added fats or oils? For a Holstein cow over 70 pounds of milk, I think we need to get the alternate energy source in here. For Jerseys, probably around 55 pounds of milk. For undegraded protein, to back up on that one quickly before doing this PowerPoint, I would probably start around 60 to 65 pounds. For undegraded protein becomes really important to bring in the diet. For Holsteins and Swissers, large breed cows or small breed cows, probably around 50 pounds of milk, 45. The undegraded protein will have some biological effect on it. If you really want to check this out, go ahead and use one of the model programs out there. We've decided now, because my cows, if they're Holsteins, are averaging 70, 75, 80 pounds of milk, I'm going to come in with these products. Step 1, I'm going to use 1 pound of added vegetable oil seeds. That could be such things as a combination of 5 pounds of fuzzy cottonseed or soybean seed. That soybean seed could be either as a raw soybean, a heat-treated soybean as well. So look at your nutrient spec and determine what combination. I like the mix, actually. I like, say, 3 pounds of fuzzy cottonseed and 2 pounds of soybean seed, because I think I get the best of both worlds out there. Especially if I want bypass protein, it'll be one of the heat-treated soybean seeds out there on the marketplace. Make sure you look at, do I need fiber, do I need protein, and do I need RUP, RDP, or soluble protein? And that'll determine which of these oil seeds you'll look at. We say limit free oil. Free means that the oil has been crushed out of the seed. Best example would be corn distillers, grains, and extruded soybeans. It means that we've ruptured the seed coat, and these feeds are actually oily if you actually touch them. We say limit to a half a pound because these free oils can really hammer the fiber-digesting bacteria and run to trans acids and the CLAs that can really impact negatively butterfat test. So make sure you really watch for these trans unsaturated fatty acids, and low butterfat tests would be a signal to you that you have too much oil into these cows' rations. Once I got the pound of oil in there, I run it through my ration balancer, and it's still below 5.5% oil fat, then I would come with a half a pound of animal fat. This could be either pork or beef, whatever's most economical. Here in Illinois, it's going to be pork. If you're in Wisconsin, it's probably going to be beef. Then if I still need some additional fat because cows are getting thin, I got ketosis, I think I may get improvement in reproduction, I come in with a half a pound of inert fat. And these would be your commercial products. Examples would be Energy Booster, Megalac, products like that. And of course, we know some of the new added fat products have certain fatty acid ratios which may enhance reproductive performance. And we can talk more about that on our face-to-face discussion if we want to follow that one. So therefore, the total amount of oil and fat I like to see in a ration is 5 to 5.5% of the unprotected products in the diet. That means that you're going to add probably 2 to 2.5 to 3%, because if you have any amount of corn grain and corn sides in the diet, you will have somewhere around 2.5 of background fat in the feeding program. Finally, we go to mineral considerations and go back and take a look at the mineral module because it has a lot more depth in it. Number 1, I always use dical and monocal for my lactating cows, primarily because it's the cheapest cost or price per unit of phosphorus, and the calcium is free. If I don't need all that extra calcium, the cow is basically going to pass it through the digestive tract, so it doesn't carry any baggage with me unless we get extremely high calcium levels. We're talking ratios of 3 to 1 or greater. That's not going to happen unless you got extremely high alfalfa diets. You need lots of phosphorus. Usually it's not a problem because of corn silage, and second of all, a lot of our feeds are high in phosphorus because we got so much in the soil, and it's a real problem. So normally this is not a big concern. We are going to force feed the old NRC trace mineral numbers. You can go back and pick those out from the modules, but we're just going to force that through our mineral pack. I'm going to replace, especially for my early lactation and transition cows and dry cows, replace 1/3 of the zinc, copper, and selenium in these diets coming into these cows. In fact, on the selenium side, because it is now legal, we'll probably replace all the selenium in our transition cow diet with organic selenium that is on the marketplace. That'll cost you probably somewhere around 5 or 6 cents to do that. I think it's a good investment, a good insurance policy. I'm always going to keep my magnesium levels over 0.3%. If I have some added fat in there, I'm going to go up to 0.35%. And in my transition cows, 0.4%. And under heat stress, using some of the Georgia guidelines, I'm going to raise potassium up to 1.2, sodium up to 0.4, and magnesium up to 0.35 to be sure that under heat stress, I meet those mineral requirements. The magnesium is related to the potassium level. And some of you beef guys and gals will know that grass tetany can be a problem. That is a potassium-magnesium ratio. And so when we're raising potassium up, I want to make really sure the magnesium number comes with it to avoid any complication with those two minerals. Remember, the ratio on potassium to magnesium is about 4-1, and you can see that here on the screen. Finally, let's wrap up and say, okay, I heard Hutjens buy. It says, I'm going to use a Spartan program. How do you get paid for your time? And here's how I would recommend for some of you that are just getting into this. I would gain some experience by selecting just a couple of herds in your area that you'd like to work with. These are people that will let you use their cattle. You might be looking over a feed company or a consultant's shoulder, something like that, but just kind of develop your style. And that's what this class is doing, that you're going to have to ask yourself, how do I attack? And that's what this module is about. Some of my biases of how I put rations together. Initially, you may want to do this free of charge to gain some confidence experience and can demonstrate some real benefit to that 1 or 2 or 3 test farms as far as that goes. Thirdly, I would always charge for forage testing and other services. No free lunch here. So if you're going to start forage testing free to gain experience, trust me, you're going to have a hard time breaking that person off. So there's no such thing as free forage testing. Yes, I know the co-ops, the feed companies do that, but they roll that right in, obviously, into their feed charges. Once you have the confidence and you have a software program that's giving you the numbers you are, then here are some numbers that I hear out in the field. Charging $50 to $100 hourly rate to do rations, and that may be including when you pick up stuff on the farm and at home, and that's something you just bill out. Some veterinarians and nutritionists get in trouble because the time at home is free. There's no free time at home. You either take it away from your family or your private time, and you need to be paid for that right away. You may decide to bill charges into a feed that you will market or a co-op or company you work with, and I've seen both of these work very, very successfully. The trouble is when you market feed, now you're in the feed business, you got inventory and you got accounts receivable, and when milk prices go low, trust me, 2 people don't get paid. It's the veterinarian and the feed company, and you may be both of them, and you might be in big, big, big trouble. My goal, when you look at some of my rations, I build in right in the bottom 10 cents per cow per day. That is the consulting fee. And I think you want to try to capture that 10 cents per day, either by direct charge or hiding it in your feed stuffs. So if you're going to try to do this through a feed stuff or through a cooperative elevator, and some elevators will really welcome you if you play your cards correctly, because you become another feed salesman, but they don't have to pay you, but yet you become a feed salesman and you improve this through better health, and yet they will pay you. They don't have to worry about some of the fringe benefit costs and all those other things that go with hiring an employee here. So I want to get that 10 cents. How do I get that charge? Okay, one way to do that is to add an extra ½ cent per pound to a complete grain mix. That means if the feed company was coming to the farm with a complete 16 or 18% crude protein mixture, you would add about $10 per ton. That would be your cost. So if you set up the rations and say, okay, here's the recipe to feed mill XYZ, and for doing this and monitoring it and looking what the cows are doing on the farm, I expect you to pay me about $10 per ton delivered to the farm. And see, that gets you that 10 cents. If the cows are getting 20 pounds of these grain mixtures, that includes all those goodies we talked about earlier, there comes your 10 cents. Now you can see how the rest of the slide works. I add 2 cents per pound to a protein supplement, assuming each cow gets 5 pounds of protein supplement. There's my 10 cents. That adds $40 to a ton of finished feed. So if the feed mill says I can make this protein supplement for $180 a ton, and you as the consulting nutritionist, you would then add $40 to that, and the feed company would charge $220, and then they would pay you that corresponding amount. Another way to do it, of course, is to put on 10 cents per pound to a mineral mix. This mineral mix may include salt, dical, bicarb, and all the other goodies in there, and then that'd be $100 per ton. And these are very typical charges you'll see with a feed mill. So that's why we get in these huge discussions when we lowball it and say, well, I could put you together a dical, trace mineral, protein energy package. It should only cost you $140 a ton, and that feed mill is charging you $180. Boy, what a bunch of crooks. Well, the answer is what they're doing is they're recouping their costs of mixing and personnel and service and forage testing. And so that's why those numbers will pop up. I know companies in Illinois that will be charging $60 to $80 per ton for protein supplements and $200 a ton for minerals. Now, is that a good investment? Well, if you're getting excellent service, healthy cows, and excellent milk production, maybe that still is a very inexpensive addition to the final product. So charging for your time, we talked about different ways to do it. 10 cents per cow per day, either upfront or hiding it through a feed. You could charge $50 per hour, thinking you're going to spend about 4 hours a month on a farm. That's $200. Another consultant in Illinois has a flat $150 per month charge on a herd, and I'm sure he is working off this kind of a basis here. Some people will say $500 per day plus expenses. These are usually bigger time consultants that are going to be traveling miles rather than blocks or sections as far as that goes. If you go out to the really big herds, $1 per cow per month. So you can see pretty quickly if I got a 1,000 cow herd, I'm charging that person $1,000. And then usually it's plus travel expenses because some of these people are flying in from Arizona or from Texas or someplace like that. So you see all these different prices out here, and you'll compete in some respects if you're going to charge for your service, and I think you should. What about some of the feed cost benchmarks to take a look at? I would say, and this is in 2003, this will change from year to year, 7 cents per pound of dry matter. I like that number. That might be a little bit higher depending on where our soybean meal prices go here in the future and corn prices. If you keep your feed costs to under $5 per hundredweight, you're doing an excellent job. Income over feed costs then translates into about $7 per cow if I have $12 milk. Obviously, this number is really impacted by the current milk price that farmers receive. Feed efficiency simply says the pounds of milk per pound of dry matter. I would like to see this over 1.4. On really high producing herds, this would be 1.5. On high strings, early lactation cows, it'll be 1.7. And I would like to see my mineral costs be less than 35 cents per day. Remember, this mineral cost does not include bicarb, niacin in the additive. This is strictly mineral cost. Nice benchmarks to look at that you can compare to and say, Farmer Jones, I think I'm doing a pretty good job for you. So in summary, when we look at building rations, you need to pick some nutrient guidelines. You can do that out of the NRC. You can get the Forage Dairyman Feeding Guide, which has guidelines. You can beg your own. You can beg, borrow, steal some of mine. But when you get out there, you need to know what are you going to target out there in the feeding program for your various rations you're putting together. Number 2, you got to build an approach. When I go to the farm, how am I going to build? What kind of forage ratios do I want? How am I going to strategically place forage and other feeds in there? Number 3, how are you going to get paid? Initially, that may not be important, but down the road, if you go into this venture, you become more of a troubleshooter and nutritionist on the farm, how you get paid. And remember, a forage is always king. So anything you and I can do to make higher quality forages, that's going to make you look like a champ every time. Well, hopefully this completes this module. Hopefully you learned a few things. Thanks. Have a good day.